What's up, wild ones? Welcome to episode number 192 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Zialto, and this is Sunday Sermon number 6. If you haven't tuned in for a Sunday sermon yet, these are shorter solo episodes, just me here, for about 10 to 20 minutes, and I do things like oracle readings, share my favorite prayers and poems, excerpts from what I'm reading or books that I love. I explore creative and inspiring ideas, thoughts, and ruminations for you to be nourished and fed by going into your week, or really any day, depending on when you choose to listen to this. These are super juicy. Think of them as wild and untamed gospel, heart ponderings, and delicious morsels of wisdom to spark your own truth, your own power, and your own love from my wild soul to yours. So today the topic is holy consistency. As I was going into my birthday week, something I was thinking about and really feeling into, birthdays, the month or so leading up to your birthday, always drudges up anything that is really not useful for you to bring into the following year of your life so that you don't have to, right? And that saying, which I love, those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Those who are tuned in and aware enough to notice these things, to pay attention to these things, can really glean a lot of valuable personal insight leading up to your birthday. So I was paying attention and just noticing what was coming up, what I was resisting, what were things in my life that were persisting as a result of that, consciously shedding, really finalizing and letting go and tying up some things that I just didn't want to carry into this next trip around the sun. And so I was really thinking about resistance and realizing the places in my life where things don't flow as easily, where I still get in my own way, and where what is consistent is I create difficulty for myself. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. And I was thinking about, what is the antidote to this? If there is a universal antidote that doesn't just work for me and, being who I am, but that really could help and work for everyone, what is it? And the answer is consistency. And I want to call it holy consistency because it's not just about going through the motions or having routines, but it's really about dedicating, devoting, committing yourself to something and showing up for it in a way that creates the kind of structure that allows for flow. So ultimately, it's the real integration, it's the real marriage of the divine masculine and the divine feminine principle in your life. So I want to start with this concept. We're never starting over or from the beginning, because from whatever point we find ourselves at, we're filled with the experiences that got us there. I've been doing a lot of reflecting as well on progress, my own progress, the progress I get to witness and also facilitate in my various programs and offerings for clients. And when I think about progress, I have to think about alchemy because much energy is required to create progress. Progress results from transformation and transmutation, and there could be no progress without an object to progress. Sometimes it's a singular object, like me or you, us as people, individuals. Other times it's more of a collective object. So our culture, for example, is an enormous object and requires the individual pieces, you and me and everyone else, to be progressing in order for the whole to progress. This is why we do our work. This is why we keep showing up. This is why we don't zone out. We zone out sometimes, but this is why we always come back. Because we know that we're part of the fabric, and for the fabric to progress, all of the threads have to do their parts. This is why our personal work is self-centered, but not selfish. We have to center ourselves at times so that we can learn and grow, so that we could shed and release, we can forgive and integrate and have experiences and expand our consciousness. We can form better habits and release the ones that serve us improperly, and so on. So this is why things like meditation and rituals are so important, not just for the purification of negative ego and peacefulness of the mind, but these are productive and holy ways to practice consistency. Now, there's so much paradox in life. Some of you have been listening to the podcast for a really long time and have heard a variety of conversations we've had on the show about masculine and feminine energy. Or maybe you tuned in for Wild Soul Summer School, which we did on Facebook Live. So you've probably heard me say that one of the qualities of the feminine is that she's inconsistent. And that can actually be a good thing. And then here I am saying consistency is holy. It's the antidote to resistance. So what gives? The reason is that inconsistency of the feminine comes from trust and surrender in the ever-changing and divinely unfolding nature of life. Like if there's one constant thing in life, it's that everything is always changing, nothing is permanent, right? And what we humans crave is steadiness. We crave stability. We do crave consistency. So how can we use our rituals, our routines, our meditations, our sacred practices to create the consistency so that we can be the steady, stable thing amidst all of life's inconsistency, ever-evolving changes, the growth that's happening all the time, the uncertainty that is inevitable? So because I love to refine things to be more useful and digestible, let's take out the word inconsistency of the feminine and rather describe it as unpredictable. Because there's a lot of consistency required to be unpredictable, and there's inevitable, like unpredictability about life and the universe and the world. And in many ways, that is the feminine principle in action. Because we follow cycles and seasons and natural rhythms, those things are quite predictable in some ways, though vary in others, right? And, climate change is a big conversation right now. So the changing of the seasons for eons has been consistent and predictable. But what is going to happen within those seasons is becoming less and less predictable, right? Like for some people, the winters are lasting longer, or it's hotter for more of the year, or during the season of summer, the temperatures are rising, things like that, which are operating in an unpredictable way within these predictable constructs. So we need a certain amount of consistency and predictability. Otherwise, everything would be chaos. Like if we didn't know if the sun was going to rise in the morning or where the moon was going to come up at night, if we didn't know that the moon was going to wax and wane and become full and become dark every month, like those consistent things keep us steady and grounded in a way that prevents everything from just being total freaking chaos, right? Because we can plan our lives, right? If there wasn't this construct of time that happens every single day, everything would just literally be chaos. Would we be able to handle it? I'm sure we would, because ancestors and ancestors and ancestors ago did. There weren't watches, there weren't clocks, there was just following the sun and following the moon and the stars. But we are not conditioned that way here in the modern world. So again, with some holy consistency, with operating around the things that are predictable, we can better handle what is inconsistent or what is unpredictable. So let's come back specifically to resistance. One of the things that consistently causes resistance in anyone's life is try to make sense of things that aren't supposed to make sense. In our interview coming up October 2nd, my friend Christine Hassler is back and we talk about this. On a broad scale, we as humans try to make sense of things like natural disasters, genocide, child sex trafficking, and other things that are simply tragic and don't make sense. And when we try to make sense of these nonsensical things, we can be consumed by it. We can turn it in on ourselves. We can turn it in on God or the universe or whatever it is we hold faith in to sustain us. we question all these things that actually support us, and we try to make them wrong in the effort to make sense of something, again, that is never going to make sense. And so we waste our time rather than focusing our energy on what we can do to help or how we can impact change. On a personal level, we try to make sense out of the dramas and traumas in our own lives when really, again, they do not need to make sense. We do not need to understand them. We just need to heal. We just need to transform. We just need to do whatever we can do any given day to feel better, to do better, to take care of ourselves and to take care of our people. But because our minds are full of programming and conditioning, we're so limited in what we can actually understand. So a higher understanding is understanding that we're just not going to understand some things. And I know it might sound like I'm talking in circles, but I'm not, because this is the great paradox. We're only ever able to understand what we can conceive of. And because innately humans are good, we're never going to conceive of these tragedies. This is why it's important to expand our consciousness in the direction of positivity and wonder and awe and imagination and mystery, so that we can conceive of more things on a positive level, and so that we can create more things to support and sustain us amidst all of the things that don't. Now, sometimes people get twisted around the law of attraction and conversations around prosperity and high vibration because they start thinking that there are, for example, multimillionaires and billionaires in the world who appear not to be very good people. But when you understand how the mind works, this can actually make sense. Certain people cannot conceive of anything other than that they are entitled to and deserve millions and billions of dollars. So they acquire these things because they're not questioning their worthiness. They're assuming it. They're not questioning the possibility of the money being available. They're assuming it. And then on the other side of things, we see some of the best humans we've ever met, doubting themselves, thinking they don't deserve things. And then we wonder why things are out of balance in the world, because those that are assuming or feeling entitled to life's grandest, most magnificent boons are the people who we perceive don't deserve it, who misuse it, who mistreat people and others and don't have respect and reverence for the source from where these things come. Whereas if you're listening to this show, you probably do. So I propose, instead of getting caught up in all these resistances, all of which are mental and rooted in the ego, we can turn to the antidote, holy consistency. Holy consistency asks us to find the areas where consistency can create divine foundation for us to show up with more ease, to keep making progress, to keep taking positive right action that does far more good than harm, because this adds up. Let's use math, right? If we do more good than we do harm, there will be more good in the world than there will trauma and drama and tragedy. There can be more triumph. And speaking of paradox, I want to read you this quote from Dan Millman's Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He says, life has 3 roles: paradox, humor, and change. Paradox. Life is a mystery. Don't waste your time trying to figure it out. Humor. Keep a sense of humor, especially about yourself. It is a strength beyond all measure. Change. Know that nothing ever stays the same. This is simple, so simple. And again, we as humans are inclined, we gravitate towards the complex. So at times like these, it's so important to remember simplicity. I notice the women in my programs are often asking me for more tools before they've mastered the foundational ones they already have. And I do this too. We all do this. So this is our reminder. If something in your life feels complex, it's because you're overlooking simple solutions. It's because you're forgetting that you already have the tools. And also, like we say all the time here at Wild Soul Movement, that everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. In tough and challenging moments, we forget that, and we go searching and seeking and reaching outside instead of reaching within. And I'm not saying this doesn't mean we don't need each other. I'm not saying it's not nourishing to do things like read books or listen to podcasts, but let's be reaching for those that remind us to go within. Let's be reaching for those that support us in going within. So stop trying to figure everything out. It's a waste of time and a gross misuse of your mental energy, power, and focus. Now, the writer, Steven Pressfield, who often writes about writing, he writes about creating art, has a book called The War of Art. And I want to read you this passage because it's super practical. He says, "What does resistance feel like? First, unhappiness. We feel like hell. A low-grade misery pervades everything. We're bored, we're restless, we can't get no satisfaction. There's guilt, but we can't put our finger on the source. We want to go back to bed. We want to get up and party. We feel unloved and unlovable. We're disgusted. We hate our lives. We hate ourselves. Unalleviated, resistance mounts to a pitch that becomes unendurable. At this point, vice kicks in. Dope, adultery, web surfing. Beyond that, resistance becomes clinical. Depression, aggression, dysfunction. Then actual crime and physical self-destruction. Sounds like life. I know. It isn't. It's resistance. What makes it tricky is that we live in a consumer culture that's acutely aware of this unhappiness and has massed all its profit-seeking artillery to exploit it by selling us a product, a drug, a distraction. John Lennon once wrote, "Well, you think you're so clever and classless and free, but you're all fucking peasants as far as I can see. As artists and professionals, it is our obligation to enact our own internal revolution, a private insurrection inside our own skulls. In this uprising, we free ourselves from the tyranny of consumer culture. We overthrow the programming of advertising, movies, video games, magazines, TV, and MTV, by which we have been hypnotized from the cradle. We unplug ourselves from the grid by recognizing that we will never cure our restlessness by contributing our disposable income to the bottom line of Bullshit Incorporated, but only by doing our work." And what is our work? Holy consistency. To show up for ourselves every day, to do whatever we need to do to feed and nourish ourselves so we can keep showing up. There's another section of the book where he talks about a person who references, oh my God. So here's what just happened. I don't mind giving you some behind the scenes. I forgot to mark the page of the other passage I wanted to read, but I just flipped to it. So I'm going to read it to you. Someone once asked Somerset Maugham if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by inspiration. "I write only when inspiration strikes," he replied. "Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp." That's a pro. In terms of resistance, Maugham was saying, "I despise resistance. I will not let it faze me. I will sit down and do my work." Maugham reckoned another deeper truth, that by performing the mundane physical act of sitting down and starting to work, he set in motion a mysterious but infallible sequence of events that would produce inspiration as surely as if the goddess had synchronized her watch with his. He knew if he built it, she would come. So getting back to simplicity, let's talk about this. Is there something that you can do every single day to just get started? Maugham sits down at 9 a.m. to write every single day. What can you sit down to do at whatever o'clock every single day that can just get you started, that can step you out of resistance and into holy consistency? Now I can hear some wild souls, some brains screaming, but where do I start? And listen, if you want to embody more of your wild soul in your everyday life, build her a gorgeous foundation of consistent, aligned, divine right action, thought, word, and practice. And there's no one answer for everyone, but I can offer you some resources that we have, and I encourage you to find what aligns for you and what resonates for you. First of all, start in the morning. How you start the day will highly impact how the rest of the day goes. So if you don't have a consistent morning ritual, I have an easy peasy 9-minute one that you can download for free at wildsoulmovement.com/ritual. And the thing is this, holy consistency requires everyday commitment, dedication, devotion. Do something for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, because without the consistency, without the time commitment, you will not be able to see what actually changes for you. You won't receive the benefits of whatever the practice or the ritual is. So you need to pick something and do it every day. This is why you pick something simple at first, because if it's too complex, you will quit. Devote yourself to it. See what happens over time before you quit and move on to the next shiny thing. You've got this. Life wants to be so good to you, and it's time to let it. If you're looking for more consistent rituals that aren't just for the morning, again, we have the Wild Soul Toolkit that some of you have heard me mentioning. You can check that out at wildsoulmovement.com/toolkit. And this is also the age of the internet. You can find plenty of rituals and practices that are centered around whatever it is that you want to be being, doing, having, creating, giving in the world. So put in this effort. Rather than putting in the effort, like we said, to try to figure everything out that's unfigure-outable, put in the effort to find the ritual, to find the practice that you can be consistent with, so that you can get some holy consistency in your life, so that you can move beyond the resistance, and that you can serve, and that you can show up and embody more of your highest and your best self as more of your wild soul. Thank you so much for listening. Have an amazing and beautiful week. I hope this was useful. As always, you can find me on Instagram, instagram.com/Elizabeth D'Alto, or facebook.com/Elizabeth D'Alto. Leave comments on our posts. Let us know how these are resonating for you, what you like. Share them if there's people in your life who you know can benefit from them as well. And we'll see you next week.